Okay, so our next presentation will be from Steve, W1SRD, who was first licensed in 1974 as Whiskey November Zero November Oscar Romeo. He became W1SRD in 2000 after moving to California, and that same year, he erected his first beam in a tiny backyard in Redwood City, and that's when the DX bug bit him hard. He is currently a board member of both the Motherlode DX and Contest Club, as well as the Northern California DX Club, which he was a past president of. An avid DXpeditioner, Steve is co-organizer for the TX5S Clipperton Island DXpedition in January of this year. Prior expeditions include, raise your hand if you've worked them before, if you remember working them, TX5N, VP8PJ, VP6D, VK9LX, TX3X, and PJ4D. Yeah, there we go. There we go. I knew those calls would be familiar to some guys out there. And last but not least, Steve enjoys station building, contesting in all modes, DX marathons, chasing slots for challenge, and working top of honor role. Steve currently has 337 confirmed DX contacts into various entities. And with that, please welcome Steve, W1SRD, to the floor.
Why, thank you, Jim. And it's not confirmed. I wish they were confirmed. And who's worked Glorioso? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, it's been a tough one. It's been a tough one. It's totally appropriate that I followed the first speaker because we just did a field day in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And the logistics and all the energy and effort you guys go through to set up that fantastic looking field day is what we go through to set up a DXpedition. And I mean, the first slide was perfect, talking about logistics and all the stuff that goes into pulling it together and the planning. I mean, the fun's when you get there and operate. The work is all the lead up in the year and a half it took us to get there. We work under the umbrella of what we call the Perseverance DX Group. It's an LLC. These days, you pretty much have to have some sort of corporate entity to do anything. It also provides us some legal protection, whatever that's worth. You mentioned most of the ones we've done before. I went on all these except for the first one the team did was VK9MT at Mellish Reef. We were discussing, I think it was about a year or two ago, I came and did a talk on the trip to the Australs, the TX5N. I don't think I did the Orkney one because that was right when COVID started when we got back. But I was going to make a joke about I went from being too cold to too hot. Okay, so that's going to fall a little flat now. That's the happy team. It is actually a pretty large team for DXpedition. We had 16 members. And one of the reasons we had so many members is this one was really expensive. In fact, these things are getting insanely expensive. So the usual model that most DXpeditions have operated under is about a 50-50 contribution from the team and from contributions. Since I won't dog on them, but since the Bouvet expedition didn't quite come off as planned, we'll say that people giving you money in advance of the expedition has dropped off a lot. So when we sailed, we typically like to have about 50% plus of our expenses covered. We left with about 40%. So there was a little bit of nervousness when we left port. But anyway, that's one reason why the team is so large. And that brought its own set of challenges, but nonetheless, it was fun to have a big group. I got the biggest kick on this particular picture. Somebody from the team pointed at this picture and said, "The American flag's supposed to be on top." Well, if you're in America, we were in France. So why Clipperton Island? Well, we typically try to get a top 50 entity to go to. For a number of reasons. One is, I mean, it's more exciting for us, it's more exciting for the DX chasers, and it also tends to be much higher in terms of opportunity for fundraising. It had been several years, over a decade, since anybody had been there. Nobody had been there during the time of FT8. So nobody had ever done FT8 from Clipperton. Interesting enough, a couple of the guys that went on the 2013 expedition were also with us, which made for some really interesting experiences that they had. Another reason is this is the only place we could get a permit. And that's another problem that's happening in the DXpedition world is really, since we went to the Australs, and getting permits there is no problem because you can fly there. But getting a landing to uninhabited islands has gotten well nigh impossible. We tried the US government, we tried New Zealand, we tried Australia. Everybody was no, no, no for all the locations that we wanted to try. Even the UK was pretty much a no. And somehow we found a person in French Polynesia who administers Clipperton Island. You'll see why when we kind of back out and look at the bigger geography, why they administer it, who finally said yes. So the biggest reason why Clipperton, we could get a permit. And the reason why a permit's so important is the ARRL will not certify a DXpedition for credit unless you've got all the proper paperwork lined up. Otherwise, you'd have people just showing up all over the world doing stuff and they weren't approved by the governments. Where the heck is Clipperton? Well, it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, as are most good uninhabited islands. 1,200 K off the coast of Mexico, and about 1,000 miles south, or 1,600 miles south of San Diego, where we sailed out of. It's the only French possession in the North Pacific. Trivia. That's a good good positioning. So it really, you know, again, it's kind of almost due south from here, maybe a little bit of southeast. The French are getting more and more interested in Clipperton. And the reason why is the 200-mile exclusive economic zone and fish. So as fishing becomes more and more of a challenge, protection of your fishing rights becomes more and more of a focal point for governments. And this is some really rich fishing around Clipperton, and they treat it as a marine preserve and try to keep excessive commercial fishing out of it. What is it geography-wise? It's as several of the islands I've been to, it's the remnants of an old volcano with coral atoll built on top of it. Not hardly any of the island is more than maybe 10, 12 feet off the surface of the ocean. This may not even be there in 50, 60 years. There is one rock that exceeds, that's a little bit higher. You'll see it in some of the pictures. But for the most part, it's just a low sand bar in the middle of the ocean. The center lagoon is closed off from the ocean. So, sometime about 100 years ago, something happened, and it for a while it was open in the ocean, then it closed it off. So the center lagoon is really kind of this brackish, we thought okay water, and I'll tell you a story about that later. There's a lot of history that's gone on there. It's not inhabited now. It has not been inhabited for quite some time. It's not very big. I mean, 6 square miles of total territory. It takes you about 45 minutes to an hour to walk around. Temperature-wise, this is a complete and absolute lie. Reality is it was more like 90 degrees Fahrenheit and 90% humidity. So if you look at the charts, I mean, that's right in the danger zone of heat exhaustion and all sorts of bad things happening. I wish it was this nice. That would have been quite pleasant. It was not that nice. And the wind speed was also an absolute and utter lie. It blew about 20 miles an hour the entire time we were there, which made for some challenging stuff. It also really radically affected what our plans. I'm not going to go into a whole lot about the landing permit, but the big thing is if it weren't for Philippe, FO4BM, it never would have happened. This guy went really to the mat to help us out with the local people in French Polynesia to get the license and the landing permit. The likelihood of somebody else getting another landing permit, at least Americans, for Clipperton is about 0. When we were there, it suddenly came to Paris's attention that we were there. And there were some people that were actually quite upset. And control of Clipperton was transferred to Paris while we were on the island. So that's how upset they were. And just a total side note, and I'm not dogging on the French by any stretch of the imagination, but Glorioso is a good example. It's a French-administered island in the southern Indian Ocean by a part of France's internal organization called TEAF, which is kind of their Antarctic and Southern Ocean administration. All these islands are not difficult for us to work if there was a ham on them. But getting permission to get a ham on them has been the challenge. So again, it's really the governments don't want, and I don't know if it's risk averseness or supposed environmental protections or whatever reasons they have, they just really don't want hams on in these islands. Along with the landing permit, there was a paragraph in it that says, and oh, by the way, this place is really dangerous and you could die, which we already knew. I think I have a video somewhere in this that you'll get a better sense for it. What made Clipperton really interesting compared to some of the other islands that I've landed on is that most islands will have a fringing reef, 100 yards out from the beach. And that's where the ocean breaks. So you've kind of got a little bit of a calm area between the fringing reef and where you need to land. And there's usually enough draft for those zodiacs and other stuff to get in there. On Clipperton, the fringing reef is about 50 yards offshore. To less. In our case where we landed, it was less. So basically you have the ocean crashing into where you need to be getting onto the beach. So it made for some really dodgy landings, and probably the biggest challenge of the expedition was getting stuff and people safely on and off. I will say, I'll fast forward to the end, everybody got on and off safely, nobody got hurt. Yeah, some gear was lost, but that's gear. Another interesting thing is we had some guests along with us for the trip. Part of the conditions, and this is not atypical, it's happened with tons of expeditions over in the past, is you get the landing permit because you take along a scientist or you take along a naturalist or some other thing. U.S. Fish and Wildlife does this all the time. If you want to get onto some of the American islands, you have to take a fish and wildlife or a biologist or something. So we had two scientists with us, one from France and one from French Polynesia. And the guy on the left is from French Polynesia, and he'd actually been to Clipperton in 2015 and had written a book-sized paper on fauna and flora, specifically focused on red crabs and rats. And so he wanted to come back and do research and see what had happened in the intervening years with red crabs and rats. And he brought one of his compatriots on the right with him, and I'll tell you some stories about their research. The guy on the left came along, and he actually paid us full boat to come along. This guy has had an obsession his entire life about Clipperton. He lives in France. And he smiled like that the whole time. He was so excited to come to Clipperton. It was just almost hard to believe. And as good as times, we're up in the main part of the boat on the trip down. And it was a long trip. It was 8 days each way on the boat. And I'm looking over his shoulder, and he's talking with the two scientists. And he's got this book laid out in front of him with maps and charts and diagrams and data. And I'm looking at this stuff thinking, that is more detail than we ever saw. I mean, you just can't find it on the internet. I mean, it is internal to France documentation. So it became a really interesting conversation talking about the landings and the detail and the information that he had that was very useful to us. And we're talking about the research they're starting to do. And I said, oh, by the way, did you guys know about the hurricane? What hurricane? They hadn't heard about the hurricane that wiped out Acapulco, which had happened it was just last fall. And I think the track of the storm went over Clipperton. And they're like, what? They thought I was making something up to mess with them. So we had Starlink on the ship, and I pulled up, I think it was a Wikipedia page, and it had the storm track. And sure enough, it went right over Clipperton. And they're like, huh. Well, I'll tie the story together in a little while. Logistics. Get back to the boring old hard work. So as we've done on the multiple past expeditions, we ended up at Walt's house in the Bay Area. He's been very generous to loan us his 3-car garage multiple times for multiple months at a time. This is, by the way, the last time he's going to do that. We gathered our gear there and packed as usual. What was nice this time is we didn't have to worry about shipping it to another country. So transportation this time was handled by U-Haul, with Doris and I being the haulers. We rented a U-Haul, filled it up in Los Altos, and drove it to San Diego, which actually made it really, really simple. Still a lot of work, but it made it really, really simple. We drove down. We backed it up to where the boat was. The crew and some dock workers came. Sorry, getting too far close. You didn't put a piece of tape up here. They basically came unloaded the truck for us and loaded the boat. That was super, super nice. That is the first shot of the back of the boat with all of our crap starting to be slowly moved onto the boat. Yeah, the team got together. We have team dinner. Great. The boat is called the Shogun. It is a sport fishing boat, is its primary mission in life. It's a very nice boat. It's a very nice sport fishing boat. It is not an expedition boat, and I'll go into that a little more as we go along. They did a great job, don't get me wrong. Again, not dogging on them, but their primary thing is fishing. Not a huge boat, but plenty big for this kind of mission and plenty of range. In some prior talks, I've done a lot of comparisons to a boat called the Braveheart, which was a pretty well-known DXpedition boat. And for those of you that have heard of or seen talks or heard of talks about the Braveheart, it's obviously out of business. COVID did it in. But it was a little bit bigger than this boat, not quite as wide, but it was designed for expeditions. And as we learned through this process that there's a huge difference between boats that are designed to do expeditions and ones that aren't. However, they were really, really good fishermen. In fact, just like any hobby, everybody's got measures of what's great. One of the things hams do is we collect countries or entities for DXCC. These guys are looking for these magical tuna that have these gigantic sickles. And apparently that is a once-in-a-lifetime fish that he caught there. So that was a pretty big moment for them to catch some of these tuna, and really good eating for us. Oh, that little guy on the side there is a local lobster that grows in the water around Clipperton. It's pretty tasty. I mean, it was no Maine lobster, but it's still pretty tasty. One of the things that we didn't suffer on the Shogun was good food. This guy's actually really a real chef. So he had started a business right before COVID, which again, bad luck. So he was kind of trying to build up some cash and do some stuff to restart a restaurant. And one of the gigs he did was this, and he so overfed us, it's hard to even describe. So imagine, a bunch of old men that are, half of them are seasick, and he decides to serve us these, 5-star restaurant class meals at 8 o'clock at night. It's like, come on, guy. I mean, we wanted to eat at 4 and go to bed. He never changed, but we did eat well, even if he ended up feeding half of it to the fishes. Shogun's it's a very comfortable ship. It would have been super if it weren't for that time of year, and remember all the storms that were in the Pacific. It was an extremely uncomfortable ride both ways. And for people that were prone to seasickness, they spent most of the 8 days each way in their bunks. I don't get seasick, but I didn't feel very good. We did do Marine Mobile, as we typically do. That was a lot of fun. We worked a lot of people. The cabins, again, comparison to Braveheart, way nicer, way more comfortable. Sink in the cabin. That's not one of our pictures. Somebody already took that. It's talking with this Gene is K5GS puts most of these presentations together. He was wanting to talk about the status of the lagoon and how it was kind of interesting scientifically, using a word that none of us had ever heard of, a meromictic lake. Basically means it's stratified water as it accumulates over years and different densities and temperatures. Originally, myself included, several of us used it for bathing until one of the French scientists pointed at it and said, "It's probably full of E. coli." And then you look at the lagoon and you'll see pictures as we get on, but we're living with thousands and thousands of birds. None of them go in the lagoon. And it's suddenly, okay, maybe we should have been paying attention. Nobody got infected, but we all stopped bathing in the lagoon. When we arrived at Clipperton, everybody was happy. It was 8 days of hell that were done. That's EY8MM from Tajikistan. He's done many expeditions. He's a fantastic photographer. A lot of these pictures were from him. Very happy. One thing that's not showing is when we got there is that the surf was pounding the island. And the captain, we did 2 circles around the island. And our original landing spot was going to be on the southeast corner, and the waves were completely not going to work there. We ended up on the southwest corner, since most of the waves were, most of the swell was coming from the northwest. I mean, the storms were up in the Pacific by California and off the coast. So that's where the worst swell was coming, but there was also swell coming from the other direction, and there was also a huge swell coming from the east. So we ended up landing where we didn't originally plan to land. Those were our transports. They were aluminum, custom double-hulled aluminum skiffs. They were fine for purpose. What wasn't quite as fine for purpose is the motors. So one of the things the Braveheart had is they had a jet boat Zodiac with no prop. Actually, that was pretty brilliant. Now I understood why he'd bought one. Getting there, on and off safely, was pretty dodgy. Basically, we went on the island at the beginning and we left the island at the end. There was no back and forth. The ship would bring us food, fuel, and water when they could, which typically was daily. So there was a window at high tide, usually in the morning when the winds were low, that it was relatively safe to get over. And that's when they would bring us food, and that's also when we did most all of our transport. That's not the video yet. Okay, I keep waiting for the video to play. So back to the concept of the expedition versus non-expedition boat. When we first started doing the evolutions of getting on and off the island, this crew really had very little experience doing it. And we couldn't really advise them either. They had to sort it out. There was a small gap in the reef that we knew about and they knew about coming into this. But the crew itself had never had any experience doing this kind of expedition work. So our first few days of trying to get stuff over was very dodgy until they sorted out kind of their technique to make it safe for them and for us. And what ended up happening is they would have two guys, there's one guy, and there's another guy, standing on each side, that's the size of the gap in the reef, standing on each side. And the boat would approach the skiff, and the driver of the skiff would kill the motor right as he got to those guys, and they would be guiding us, into the right spot. And they would grab the skiff, and he would then have to lift the motor out so we wouldn't destroy the props and the motors on the reef. And then they would hand drag those things in. Luckily, these guys were very young, very strong, very fit, and thought this was great. They were having the time of their life. And again, nobody got hurt. Still not the video? It's coming up somewhere in there. As part of the learning process, a few skiffs were overturned. Again, nobody got hurt, but we lost stuff. Now you can see, oh, there's the video. And this was a relatively calm day. And you can see how shallow it is too. I mean, there's really very little draft under that boat, and it's, they're just waist high there. So the waves are literally breaking at the gap in the reef. So anyway, that gives you a flavor for kind of the challenges of the get on, get off. Another key thing is you heard Jim reference me as one of the co-leaders. That's because the expedition leader had to be a Frenchman. Meet Jackie. ZL, better known as ZL2CW. He's a pretty well-known operator. You've probably heard. He's also F2CW. And this is the third French island I've been to. I don't know what's going on with that, but this is the third French location. And every time you go there and it's an uninhabited one, they reaffirm sovereignty by raising a fresh French flag. So actually, Paris was really happy about this picture. For those of you that heard the TX5N talk, we have a little bit of an unusual way of scheduling operators in that we do it only in 4-hour shifts. A lot of other DXpeditions will drive people for 8-hour shifts, which is really just a bit much. Because if you're really, really hitting it hard and you got a high rate, you're just exhausted at the end of even 4 hours. But the other thing that we do differently is we rotate the times that you do your 4-hour shifts. So for 2 or 3 days, you'll be on one time slot, like 1800 to 2200. And then you'll roll forward. So then you'll do 2200 to 0200. So that way, each person on the expedition gets to experience all of the different propagation conditions through the rotation of the clock, the sun and the day. It's really great for the experience. That way you get gray line experience, you get, middle of the night, you see all the different propagation conditions, and that's great. What it does, the negative is it puts you in perpetual sleep deprivation. It's like you're jet lagged the whole time. So this is our camp, and these are our compatriots. And they're great. I mean, they were actually they were super entertaining. It was really interesting, and they were not unfriendly birds. But the one thing that you could guarantee is that when the sun came up, you got up as well, no matter what your shift time was, no matter how much you wanted to be asleep, because they woke up. So once they woke up, everybody else got up. You also see some of just like your antenna plan, we had an antenna plan too, which was immediately torn up as soon as we got to the island. The original plan was to have 2 camps, about 500 meters apart. One was going to be a phone camp, and one was going to be a CW camp. So that meant we had originally had 2 full sets of tents. We'd had 2 full sets of antennas, so on and so forth. We got there, and it was very obvious that we were barely going to get enough stuff ashore to have 1 camp. And getting stuff ashore to get 1 camp set up took almost 3 days to get everything over. And that was the net result. And we ended up with 5 active stations and then 1 set of antennas that covered all bands. And the types of antennas that we use on these expeditions is typically these what are called vertical dipole arrays. And they're these cross-like things. And then there's a front wire and a back wire. So it's a vertical beam, if you will. And when you're on saltwater, verticals work really, 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 really well. So that's why you don't need a whole lot of big antennas on if you're on a beach on saltwater. But we had all bands covered 10 through 160. And we also had a guy come along for a first, at least from Clipperton, who was a heavy-duty EME satellite 6-meter guy. And he brought a whole bunch of gear, and I think I've got some good shots of that later. The sleep tents were actually very comfortable. We bought some nice REI tents, and they worked out well. We had 3 people in each, and they stood up to the wind and the weather quite well. The operating tents, and like I said, we ended up with only 5 stations out of a planned 9. Actually, we had originally planned on having 9. But this actually worked out really well. And as you see the numbers, you're going to see, I feel we did really well. I want to point out this thing. For those of you that know, that's a Starlink. And I think that was mine. We brought 2 of them. Those turned out to be just incredibly valuable. We got a slide about it later, but I'll go ahead and tell the story now. I had called or emailed Starlink support. Of course, you can't call them. There's no phone number. And asked them, because I'd looked at their availability map, and I don't know if you've ever looked at Starlink availability map, but they've got little hexagons of wherever coverage is around the whole globe pretty much. And there was these 2 hexagons in the middle of the Pacific about where I thought Clipperton was. And I drilled in, hoping I'd see like the outline of the island or something, but nothing. It was just ocean. So I sent their support the exact lat long of the island, and they replied the next day and said, yeah, works there. We can't promise you it'll be great coverage, but it works. It worked great. Obviously, not much competition for bandwidth there. So this is one of the shifts, and I want to ask anybody, tell me what's unusual about that picture. Who said it? Who said no headphones? That's right, no headphones. What the heck? Are these not CW guys? Are these not phone guys? What's wrong with these guys? It is FT8 on the computers, and this was my shift. I'm in the very back. You can't really see me. And this is toward the end of the expedition, and we were at, when our shift started, I don't even remember what time of day it was, we were at like 95,000 QSOs. And we were like, we want to be the team to hit the 100,000, or maybe it was 94. And so the highest rate mode by a long shot these days is FT8. Especially, we had a customized version of WSJT that fixed a whole bunch of bugs in foxhound mode. And so we were able to very frequently get 10 stations on each turn. So we'd be sending 5 RR73s and we'd be sending 5 new reports. If any, you're nodding your head like you watched us. It was amazing because the theoretical rate then is 600 an hour. Now, of course, you're never going to get a perfect 10 each time. But there were many, many times where we saw a real 400 plus hour. No human operator can do that on CW or phone at all. So what we decided as a team is, even though some of us like doing phone, some of us like doing CW, and it was kind of up to individuals, we decided as a team, we're going to all do FT8. And we did, and we cranked out 5,000 QSOs in one 4-hour shift, which I think, yeah, I think that's a first. And we actually had a great time. I mean, we were yelling at each other, and I got 10, I got 8, you know, so on and so forth. So we made it fun. Yeah, but we set it up for the next team to get the 100,000, but anyway. So that's, well, we had one more of the small generators, but that's all we were able to get off the ship. We left multiple generators back on the ship. And I, luckily or unluckily, since I'd done so much of the bringing together of all the gear, I got to stay behind on the ship and fight with the captain about what went sent over when. And he and I got in some pretty big arguments about when generators went. But we did get enough over to run everything that we needed to run, and fortunately none of them failed. Jackie, oh, ZL3CW. I think I said ZL2CW. Just like field day, we worry very much about interstation interference. So we'd had a whole bunch of stuff set up and planned for filters, high-powered filters. And that's the filter board there. But since we weren't going to have 2 camps, it actually really simplified it. And what we did is we just pretty much, since there was propagation was just so good, we pretty much, nobody was on the same band at the same time. So it made interference really kind of a non-problem almost. Let's see, there we go. That's what I was looking for. So I mentioned that our original intent was to be on the east side of the island. We ended up on the west side. The wind was blowing constantly from the east. This is a coral island with millions of birds. And so guess what was in the air? Lots of dust and guano. That's one day's accumulation. Amazingly, we didn't have any gear fail. We were using all Elecraft stuff. Some of it was our own because they don't make K3s anymore. They did loan us a few K4s and some amplifiers, which was really nice. But since these were guys' personal gear and they were so trashed because all that crap got sucked into it, and what I discovered, which I thought was really interesting, is you can't just blow it out. The stuff sticks to all electronics. So you open the covers up and it's just, you've got to mechanically remove it. So we paid to send them back to Elecraft and have them refurbished. Yeah, there's one of the KPA 500s. It was gnarly. And when it really dawned on me, like one of the first nights when I was outside with my headlamp on and I could suddenly see what was in the air and think, man, we are breathing that. Oh, there's a great picture. So that's Andreas. He's also from the Bay Area, N6NU. He's really into satellites and EME, and this was all of his personal gear that he brought along, including this custom phase 7-element 6-meter arrays that he brought. And he mainly had brought that for EME, but we were going to also obviously use it for terrestrial. The sad thing is we never had a good 6-meter opening. We had a couple into the southern tier, like Texas, Arizona, maybe even a little east of there, but that was it. We were hoping for one of those miracle F2 openings where we would work, thousands of people in a few hours, but unfortunately never happened. He did make a whole lot of EMEers very happy. I think he worked 150 or 160 EME contacts, which is really quite a lot. And he made a lot of satellite people super happy. He had worked, and I can't remember the guy's call sign. I think he's in the Netherlands. He'd worked with him to customize the software that they use for the satellite QSOs so that he could, much like Foxhound, he could do multiple ACKs acknowledgments in each go. And so he was able to put hundreds and hundreds of satellite contacts in the log. So a lot of people were really happy about that. But Andreas worked his butt off. mostly alone. And that's in the satellite, that's his satellite EME gear. He had these antennas, these 6-meter beams, custom made, and they're put together with magnets. So the elements have matching magnets on the boom, and so it actually only takes him a few minutes to put it up because he uses this for like VHF roving and stuff. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I talked about the high-powered filters. They work great. I talked about the VDAs. They work fine. These are all custom. I mean, we build our own. They're not especially complex antennas, which is another benefit to them is they're very robust. On the other bands, everything was verticals as well. So we had verticals for 30, 40, 80, and 160, as well as the dipole arrays for everything up. And I've got some shots of that. So that's the 80, I think that's, yeah, oh, that's the 160. So WD5COV, one of the guys that was on the expedition, is a 160 aficionado. He basically custom designed this antenna, custom built it with parts that he had and also that DX Engineering donated to us. And, you know, I thought, great, you know, 160, wrong part of the solar cycle, we're not going to make any contacts. This antenna actually just really kicked some butt, and we worked, well, you'll see when we get to the numbers, but we worked FT8 all the way into Europe on 160, which I really thought all we were going to work was the West Coast, if we were lucky. And he designed it really smartly, too. It's a little hard to see, but that's the main mast of the antenna, and that's a falling derrick. And he had designed it so that he alone could erect it. And it was really cool. So, I mean, he had the whole falling derrick thing, and he could just take a rope and pull it. I wish we'd filmed it because it was pretty amazing. Okay, how about the numbers and the performance? The blend of parts of the world was about what we expected. I mean, obviously, we're very close to North America, so almost 50% was North America. We were happy with the European numbers at 30%, and Asia was about 20%. Really kind of in line with what we expected. The band mix, where's our 160 number? Say 2,500 on 160. I mean, like, wow. 80 was 7,200, which again was pretty surprising. But then we get into the real money, and 40 and up was just incredible. With 12 and 10 just being mind-boggling, because it was open to the world at all times. In fact, a lot of people, in general, most people were pretty happy with us, I think. But there was times when a lot of people in North America would be very upset because we were telling them to stand by because we're working Europe. And if you just look at the sun, you're going to figure out why we're ignoring North America and working Europe. Wait a couple hours. The sun's going to set in Europe. And it did, and then we worked tons of North Americans. The other no surprise is FT8 has become about a 50% mode for DXpeditions. Unless you specifically don't want to do FT8, it's going to be about half your contacts, which is fine because I think we're getting to people that we wouldn't otherwise get to, because FT8 opens a lot of doors for people that don't have high power, don't have big antennas. We got letters and notes afterwards, you know, guys that were in Tokyo that had a piece of wire hanging off their balcony, kind of things, you know, 5 watts, and I worked you and they were thrilled. These are just some snapshots of what I was talking about in terms of the rate that we could do with this new version of WSJTX. It was not unusual to see 300 to 400 very consistently, even when the bands weren't that great. And I want to emphasize, we used authentic WSJTX. Not MSHV, not JTDX, not one of these other derivatives that have a ton of bugs and problems that are causing a lot of people grief working DXpeditions. This was the real thing, real foxhound. Every one of our contacts was not a robot. It was a human being that selected the call that got worked. I want to emphasize that. There was a human being on every single QSO. Any questions? Oh, one last thing. This was the by day. So, like I said, it was a slow start, and we were actually catching a lot of grief from people about the slow start. You know, you want to get on the air as fast as you can with as much as you can. The first few days we had like 1 or 2 stations on. Numbers weren't that great. People were like, oh, a bunch of losers, you're going to fail, yada, yada, yada. Then we disappear from the air about 000 on this day, and we were off the air for 4 hours. Then DX Summit's like, they're done. No, we were setting up all stations. And when we came back on the air 4 hours later, we made 16,000 contacts in the next 24 hours. People shut up. And then we did it again, 15,000, 17,000. We had an 18,000 day and almost an 18,000 day. So even though our expedition was compressed quite a bit from what we had hoped, because we basically lost a day and a half on the front, day and a half on the back, and then we were a little slow on the get-go, and we only had one camp instead of two, we still almost hit we were shooting for 150,000. We ended up with like 135. So we were pretty darn happy about that. But that was really, really fun. And the other thing, did that show that? Yeah, this dupe number. So another thing that we track as DXpeditioners is how many dupes we have in the log. Because people tend to work you twice if they're not sure that they worked you. And some people work you twice just because they can. A typical dupe rate is going to be 5 to 6%. That was under 3, and we think it's because of that. So and it was really just a few weeks before we left, I decided that we would use Club Log's live stream. And initially, we'd had a really bad experience a few expeditions before using live stream. Not Club Logs, it was a different one. But we decided to do Club Logs because his is really, they've got it sorted. It works really, really well. And so people were seeing that they were in the log typically within 60 seconds of the contact. So it was a really neat system where all the logging laptops would send to a central collector laptop that would then talk to the Starlink that would talk to Club Log. And so people would see their contacts really fast. And we think that really, really lowered the dupe rate because people could just say, yep, I'm in the log. Did you watch it? Yeah. And another fun thing about it is it would also show you your rate. So on the live stream, it would show you how many QSOs a minute have they been doing. So that was really fun to watch too, and try to get that for us to get that number up as high as we could. Okay, how about some nature? These are the birds we lived with, and funny enough, it's always been the mascot of Perseverance is these boobies. Yeah, that's what they're called, boobies. Don't giggle. They're actually quite beautiful birds, if not a little bit loud and a little bit nippy. I got a pretty good bite on my hand from one of these guys. Not their fault. I had bent down to grab some coax, and I didn't notice the mother's nest right here. And she took exception to my hand coming down into her territory. What's interesting about them is they typically just lay their eggs in the sand. They hatch, and they're just basically naked. And as soon as they hatch, mom leaves because she hasn't eaten for days while she's sat the egg. And so she goes out to fish and then hopefully comes back. We saw several chicks that expired before mom got back, or maybe mom was never coming back because something happened to her. But there was this one little guy that I'd really been watching because she'd laid the egg right between our two tents. And I was convinced somebody was going to step on the egg. And when the chick hatched, I was convinced somebody was going to step on her. So I had kind of built a protective barrier around, but then mom didn't come back. And the chick's looking, I thought it was doomed. And 2 days, mom didn't come back. And then this is right toward the end of the day, I happened to be walking, and right as I was walking by her little protective barrier, guess who landed? And I grabbed my phone and started taking pictures. And boy, that chick came to life quick. And mom kept feeding and feeding and feeding, I think until there was no more fish left. And then mom left again, but the chick was still doing fine when we packed up. So I wish her the best. That was pretty sweet. Another thing is, I talked about the red crabs and the rats. Instead, I get back to that. So we'd had a friend that had told us stories about Clipperton from a 2000 or so expedition. And one of the features of that was that the island was covered with these guys. And so we had brought hundreds and hundreds of feet of crab fence to put around the camp to keep them out, because the problem that these past expeditions had is these guys would get under the tents. You've got the flooring. The problem is you start walking on the tent, what happens to the crabs? And in 90-degree heat, you can imagine. We got to the island, There's no crabs. Very few. I mean, there's crabs, but I mean, there's not millions of crabs, and they're definitely not carpeting the ground like we were told they would be. Likewise, the scientists put traps for the rats all over the island. Guess how many they caught? 1. So my theory is the hurricane washed them all out to sea, and the crabs. So that's one reason why the birds were thriving, is there was no rats to eat, that were killing the eggs, and there was no, and I did see a crab steal an egg and run off with it, and there was no crabs, stealing their eggs. So I think the bird population had actually surged, and my bet is on an environment like this is that you see that kind of ping-ponging of, explosions and contractions of different species depending on, what the situation is. That's my theory. I have no idea. I'm not a scientist. Some of these pictures also, I mean, this is not a tropical paradise. You have visions of islands in the Pacific being tropical paradise. This place is actually awful. I mean, I'll just be really frank. I never want to go back. I've been there. I've breathed it for 7 days. Yeah, it was hot and miserable. But it was still a great trip. Plenty of interesting stuff as you walk around the island. The Americans built a base there, of course, during World War II. There's still live ammo left over from World War II that still cooks off occasionally, because, of course, we didn't clean anything up. More recent remnants on the island, that's a drug running boat. No drugs in it. But these are like custom-built, handmade boats just for the drug runners. And the guys, I mean, obviously they ride very low to keep a low radar signature, but the pilot stands the whole time. I mean, he's probably getting paid a lot. He's not paid to sleep and rest. But boy, the crew sure wanted those engines. I guess they're about 50 grand each, but way too heavy to get off. Yes, oh yeah.
Not a very good navigator either, Clipperton.
Yeah, you kind of wonder about the backstory on that, huh? How did that happen? And then this was a shout out to our local homeboys. Doris and I drove the U-Haul back, and of course it was at the tail end of one of the huge storms. It had rained on us the whole drive from San Diego up, and so we'd gotten to the Central Valley and it stopped raining. I thought, great. But we'd already lined these guys to help us unload. And, of course, as soon as we hit about Folsom, it just started dumping. So it was cold and wet, but these guys came out and helped us unload, which was greatly appreciated. Of course, everything ended up in storage in Placerville, all wet and smelly. And I think we haven't been to the storage in months, and it's probably still smelly. Because everything stank coming back. I'll just be really frank. It stank. And you don't realize it when you're there until you get back. And then as we're unpacking stuff from the various containers and stuff, it's like, oh man, that smell. I just can hardly stand it. In the end, because we got on the air, because we made a lot of QSOs, made a lot of people happy, the money started flowing rapidly the minute we set sail. And then when we got on the air, the money really started flowing. So I think what's happened, and we're calling it the Bouvet effect, is people aren't going to open their wallets until they actually see that you're going to perform. That's fair. Thanks to my wife, lovely wife Doris, she's got a official T-shirt because she's collected the money. She took care of the websites when we were on the island. The other huge thing, other than the expeditioners' wallets and the donations from the DX community, is the contributions from corporate. And I can't say enough great things about DX Engineering. Tim K3LR is the owner. We basically contact him when we're going on an expedition. We say, here's, it's us. Here's what we're going to do. And he usually just says, whatever you want. And we send him a spreadsheet, and stuff just starts coming. So they're just fantastic. So I just encourage you, if you're going to buy stuff, buy it from DX Engineering. Sorry. We've asked your CEO.
I think this guy bought 2 710s in one day. So it's not faulting him.
That one was for the club, remember?
Yes.
Wasn't 2 for me. I did the 710. And I told him when we were talking about it. I did buy the 710 because Elecraft stopped making the K3. The K3 is like the ultimate DXpedition radio. I mean, it's small, compact. It's a fantastic radio. They don't make anything like that. K4 is great radio too, but way, way, way bigger. And they work great, but I mean, it's just the physical size. You want to minimize that as much as you can. So that's why I'm testing the 710. It may be our next go-to expedition radio, and I'm really impressed with that radio. It's a nice radio. Lots of clubs and foundations. Northern Cal DX Foundation, of course, is always the biggest contributor to most expeditions. They gave us a good check. I called out these guys. We actually got a really nice donation from the Motherlode Club, too. So it's always appreciated, any support we can get. There's a thing called pilots. A lot of you may have heard of that, not heard of it. Basically, they're guys around the world that act as your collector of information when you're on the island. And so if there's feedback to be given, they get it. We actually got very little feedback. Again, I think most people were pretty happy. The guys that are doing it for FT4GL, they're having a little harder time. The Shogun crew, all I'm going to say is this was the captain. His nickname's Rambo. Rambo and I came to an understanding. I'll tell one story. So there were multiple times where he wasn't doing what I wanted him to do, and I certainly wasn't making his life easier. But I said, we've got to get tables and chairs over there. And he said, the tables and chairs are in that hold. And I go around, look in the hold. There's nothing in the hold. And he starts cursing at me and says, it's in the bleep, bleep, bleep hold. And I finally yell back, it's not in the bleep, bleep, bleep hold. Come and look. And he comes over, he stares in the hold, and then, a sailor's string of expletives come out. Because, if you look, there was nothing in the hold but water. And that's what made him angry, is why is there water in the hold? And it turns out, the tables and chairs were in there at the bottom, under the water. One of these guys' shoes had gotten clogged in the drain, and the thing had filled up with water. Anyway, they were tables and chairs, so it didn't hurt him. But yeah, I think that was one of the points where Rambo and I finally started to understand each other. But he was a good captain. One last story to wrap it up. We did have a rather interesting event on the way back. Most of us were down below or up on that deck that you saw, in the kind of the galley area. And but I was in my bunk. I spent most of 8 days in my bunk. It just starts to wear on you. When all of a sudden the ship shook and shuddered, and a huge bang, and you're thinking, that doesn't sound so good. And then the engines pull back, and then you're like, okay, that's not good. And I get out of my bunk to start going upstairs because all the bunks were down below, and there's just a waterfall coming down the stairs. Okay, that's really bad. And I got up, as we're all kind of coming out of there, all the crews, yelling and shouting and screaming, and there's water everywhere in that galley area, and I look up and there's a window missing. And what had happened is we got hit from the wrong direction. I guess there's no right direction. We got hit from the opposite direction of the swell by a rogue wave. About a 20-footer, the captain said. And they saw it right before it hit, and they had enough time to say, and luckily, nobody was hurt badly. I mean, one of the guys, Chris, he got banged in the head because he was sitting right by the window. But the interesting part of the story, I mean, rogue waves happen, but windows on these ships are not supposed to blow out. I mean, that's not right. The irony is that window was mandated by the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard wouldn't let them leave before they replaced it with this new style. Good job. Good new style of window. The main casualty was my computer, which I unfortunately had left up on the table right next to the window. I'd never actually seen a laptop smoke, because that's where I first went to look. Was, okay, did my laptop get washed away? And it was sitting on the table, and smoke was coming out of it. That's probably not a good thing. It was dead. It was gone. Anyway, that is Clipperton. Any questions? Did I do? Yeah, I did about an hour. He's bringing you.
Yeah, I forget about that. Anyway, what you experienced with the environment there on Clipperton, and what you were expecting, is what Rusty Epps saw in the mid-'80s.
Yes. Well, Rusty is a good friend of ours, and he's the one that told us the story about the crabs.
Yeah, I used to work with him. That landing that you experienced as well as the get off, yours was better than his.
Yes, there's been some dodgy ones. There's been some dodgy ones. Actually, I'm probably standing here because of Rusty. Doris labeled him the Hambassador. I had an RFI problem and a neighbor problem, and I looked in the ARRL directory for lawyers, and he was one of the volunteers, and came over to my house the next day and wrote some letters to the city and taken care of. But during the conversation, he said, yeah, you know anybody likes DXing and contesting? So.
I got one.
Yeah.
What was your up and down speeds on Starlink?
I never really clocked it. It was way more than we needed. We had multiple people doing phone calls back home. I mean, I would just, with Wi-Fi calling, I was just dialing her number. It was the weirdest thing. I mean, you're out in the island in the middle of nowhere, and you just, I need to talk to so-and-so back home. You just make a phone call. Plus, we had 2 Starlinks. We had one pretty much dedicated to the radios, and we had another one for for us. But plenty of bandwidth. It's a game changer. I mean, in multiple dimensions.
Did you give any consideration to FT4?
No. Because, here's the reason why, is yes, FT4's turnaround is twice as fast as FT8's, but it doesn't have Foxhound. And so you can't get the 10 stations per cycle. So FT8 and Foxhound is way faster than FT4.
What was your favorite contact that you made?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've ever... Doris, do you remember me mentioning one in particular? It's an interesting question, and because unlike a lot of expeditions, somehow I missed working my friends. So usually I would mention somebody back here, but somehow it just never quite worked out that way. Or somebody that says something, if you're on phone, somebody that says something like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. I've been trying for 6 hours. You made my month," kind of thing. Yeah, it didn't happen. And the other thing that is, you're so busy. So if you're on CW, obviously it's you're very mentally engaged in what's happening. So you're just going. If you're on phone, it's kind of the same way. You're just going as fast as you can. Which brings to mind, during field day, it's perfect practice for how to run a DXpedition pilot. Use the fewest words possible to communicate what you want to communicate. All you have to say is 59 Sacramento Valley. Or Sugar Victor is actually better than saying Sacramento Valley, because everybody confuses Santa Clara Valley with Sacramento Valley. So yeah, that's all you need to say. No, please copy this or blah, 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 blah. Just 59 Sacramento Valley, Sugar Victor. They're all 59. It means got it, or you're using it to set a cadence. That's kind of the way I think about it, because everybody says, why do we still use 5.9? Well, to me, you're setting a cadence of a QSO. It's telling the person to be ready to copy the actual part that's important. Yes, sir.
Future DXpeditions of the racks in the box, where you drop a rack on a box.
The rig in the box. I'm going to first share my personal feelings. To me, expeditions are about storming the beach and tents and generators. It's not about dropping a rig in the box on shore. So I'll tell you right out of the gate, I'm not a huge rig in the box fan. That's my personal feelings. On a more practical, pragmatic side of it, it's already caused us not to be able to get a couple permits. Because people in certain countries have said, well, these guys that did the rig in the box said they don't need to send anybody on shore. Which is a lie. They do. But they don't need to send people there to camp. So it's already impacting those of us that want to do traditional expeditions in a negative way. On the positive, it's opening the opportunity for people to operate an expedition that never, ever were going to go to a remote island. So, I mean, like everything else, it's got a plus and minus. I personally will never do one, just because that's not what I think of as expeditioning. The big proponents of rig in the box say that it's going to allow them access to locations that we were being denied access to. I've yet to see any evidence that supports that proposition. In other words, getting permits to go places that we couldn't otherwise. Rig in a box is exactly what it says. They've made a self-contained, think of like a big Pelican case full of amplifiers and radios and other stuff that you can just, and it's got a Starlink terminal that you can hook to it. You can throw it on the island, throw an antenna up, and go back to the ship. And people can operate it from over the Starlink link. So you can sit here at your house and operate as though you're the DXpedition operator in some remote island. And they're going to do, they've already done some, but the Jarvis Island expedition that's upcoming in June is going to have about half of its team, well, more than half. There's going to be 3 or 4 people to go to the island, and then all the other operators are remote. So, I mean, it's a really interesting concept. It's just not my thing. I'd be interested to know what you think.
So,
Yeah, just a little bit of cash.
so how much did the birds interfere with, like, running into radials, guy lines, perching? I was just thinking magnet mounting elements and a bird sitting on it.
The birds showed so little interest in us. They were completely disinterested, other than if we were just, walking by them, they weren't happy about that. But other than that, no problems at all.
When any of the operators were running the phone stations, was there any bleed over from the birds onto the radio?
Probably not, and you can thank Radio Sport headsets for that. Their close talk mics don't pick up much noise. You probably didn't hear the wind either, or the flapping of the tent. Anything else? I appreciate your time very much. Hope you enjoyed it.